kindly settle down so that we can begin. Thank you very much. Who is leading the submissions? Is it you, Governor?
I am, Your Excellency.
Karibu. Please
Thank
start.
Thank you. We need a moment to settle down.
And as
to
you
get
do,
the
as you settle
technology
down,
connection.
And just to note, you have 20 minutes, like everyone else, so that you make sure you use your time well by sticking to the issues and avoiding too much explanation, so that you're able to meet all your...
Thank you.
as you do, Governor Derito, I'm sure you don't need any introduction to anybody here, but you may have to do a quick introduction of your side. Yeah? It's okay?
Thank you, Chair.
The front, yeah.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We will introduce our members very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And allow me to ask my colleague, Dr. Karogo, to do so as we...
And because you're a huge group, we'll allow you, Governor, because you're a huge group, kindly just introduce the leadership at the front, and we'll be okay with that.
We are sufficiently guided, Your Excellency. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. In front of you is the team from Azimio. We have Barnabas in the far left, is part of the technical team. We have Wakili Ndegwa Njiru. I'm sure he's not a new face to all of you. We have Fred Abongo, also part of the technical team. We have Honorable Maison Le Chamon, also from Jubilee Party. We have then Kevina Lawyer Tim, who is from DAPK, and we have Mr. Manji from Jubilee Party. This is just part of the team. We have a larger part behind us. I think as the chair of Azimio Women's League, allow me to ask all the Azimio women to be upstanding. We presented in front of you a memorandum. We have a representation from about 10 of the coalition parties. The party league chairs are also present. So at some point in the presentation, we will also speak about the 2/3 gender role. I thank you very much.
Okay, you may proceed now, Governor.
Thank you very much indeed. We obviously have a presentation, a summarized presentation on PowerPoint, but the committee will already have received a detailed presentation of the issues from Azimio. I am Derito Mureithi. I'm chair of the Economic Council of the Azimio Coalition, Azimio La Umoja One Kenya Coalition. So we thank you very much indeed for the time, and we shall make haste. The issues to be addressed as the dialogue committee has agreed and directed, so I won't really delve into them. Cost of living then. And the first item to say about cost of living is that Article 43 of the Constitution places a duty on the state to deliver on the rights and the social and economic rights under Article 43 to the highest attainable standards. You will find on close examination that the issues of cost of living are in fact contained within Article 43. So 3 broad points we'll address very quickly on the cost of living. And those 3 points are what drives cost of living. And those things are the management of exchange rate, the management of public finances, as well as the mix that is used to manage those instruments. On the question of exchange rate, I think what you will see on the slide before you is what has happened in the last 12 months. That the Kenya shilling has collapsed from 120 shillings to a dollar to 150 shillings to $1. The effect of it, of that 25% depreciation of the shilling, that is transmitted directly into the cost of living. So that everything that you are buying this year, this August or this October, is 25% more expensive than it was last year, simply because of the effect of the exchange rate. Of course, the committee will want to address itself what drives exchange rate. You've had some of it already here from FKE. Portfolio flows, meaning the monies that foreigners come to invest in our stock exchange. And what has happened is that the foreigners have left. That's why the stock exchange is at its lowest point. And I'll show you a slide to that effect in just a moment. Now, we've said to the committee, management of public finances as a key driver of the cost of living questions. Why? Because taxation and borrowing have a direct bearing on what happens to the citizen, and we'll show you a couple of slides on that. Where we are, if you on the outlook, is that we expect. When I say we expect, these are the policies and instruments that have been placed already in Parliament. For example, the budget policy statement and the midterm expenditure framework. What does it call for? It calls for increased taxation. So next year, taxes are expected to go up 400 billion. It calls for continued borrowing, and I'll show you a slide in a moment, that the budget deficit is in the order of 760 billion, and that is expected. That is what is planned. Both things imply that it is not possible to bring the cost of living under control. Third point to make, experts agree we are in dire possibility, we are in debt distress, and the risk of debt default is looming, and all those things show that, in fact, we are on a terrible trajectory. Is it only against the dollar that the shilling is losing ground? That's a chart that shows you what has happened to the shilling in relation to the Tanzanian shilling. If you just go back to the slide, what you'll notice, we're moving from, again, a similar kind of depreciation of the Kenya shilling against Tanzania. So that the argument that this is a global problem is not exactly global for every, what individual countries are doing has a lot to explain the cost of living for their citizens. Now, management of public finances is, honorable members, fairly straightforward. You make spending plans. Those spending plans need to be financed. So either you are taxing to get money to finance your budget, or you're borrowing. Usually, you're doing both. What is the issue? Why is it difficult to bring the cost of living under control? Because the tools that are being used today are blunting economic activity. They are eroding confidence. Again, going back to why is the stock exchange performing so poorly? It is leading to the flight of capital from the securities exchange, and the mix of taxation and interest is not working. The big headline point there is the budget deficit of 768 billion this year, anticipated to be 760 billion next year. Where do you get that data? From the budget policy statement and the midterm expenditure framework. Those are the same numbers in a slide. What you will see there is continued increment of government spending. And if the committee permits, economists think about cost of living or inflation as too much money chasing too few goods. So if you want to bring inflation down, then you have to slow down on expenditure. You don't accelerate expenditure. Now, what the combination of policies is doing is to increase expenditure. Yeah? And you are increasing that expenditure by borrowing. So you are suffering a double whammy. Of course, you will ask us, how then can you reduce government expenditure? What can you do? Well, first of all, eliminate corruption and theft of public resources, eliminate waste, inefficiencies, and imprudent use of public resources. To give you an example, last financial year, last quarter of financial year, so June, May, April, or May, April, June of this past financial year, 193.4 billion went to domestic and international travel. Compare that, for example, to what is expected from the housing tax, which is 70 billion. Meaning, if we did not travel, we may not have needed to collect the housing tax. You could have financed it by just stopping excessive travel. When you look at social protection, which is being reduced, when you look at the resources to counties that are not growing, all of those things could have been resolved if we avoided excessive expenditure. The other thing that happens when you're borrowing, the other thing that happens when you're borrowing is that, of course, you have to pay. So debt service, what is the issue here? The issue is that debt service is now 67% of actual tax collection. Okay? And that slide shows you where is the source of this data. Again, budget review and budget outlook, budget review and economic outlook, as well as the financial statement for this financial year. The point being, can you really grow taxation by 530 billion, which is what is anticipated this year, and can you grow it at a time when the economic conditions are so poor? What is the effect of excessive borrowing? You squeeze out the private sector, and that is what that slide, again, from the quarterly economic review by Treasury, that is what it is showing you. That the spread, the difference between what depositors are being paid by banks and what government is paying those same banks to borrow that money, that's the spread, and what you see there, it is growing. The effect of it is to squeeze out the private sector. And I think FKE were before us, and they explained this point very strongly. This is what FKE was saying, that this, the Securities Exchange is now considered the worst performing. Not considered, that is what the data is showing, the drop being what is on the slide before you. Economic growth, because when you squeeze private sector to the corner, then there is no economic growth. And this is exactly what is happening. If you compare growth quarter to quarter, what you will find is that economic growth has flatlined. Yeah? So with the exception of the COVID recovery in 2021, when you look at quarter two, basically it has flatlined. We dig deeper in two slides. What really, this inflation or this cost of living, what's inside it? What is driving it? That's the way it is. Food and fuel. So the policies we pursue must address food and fuel costs. But this is the outcome of what has happened in the last 12 months. And you can see, again, this is a data and graphic from the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. Everything, with the exception of one item there, has gone up with percentages of between 7 and 60-something%. Same there with non-food items like fuel. What you will notice, in fact, this is 1 month old now. This is before the dramatic increase in fuel price this September. So those numbers can only get worse. I know we are fond of blaming international crude prices. That is not fair to anybody because it's not true. That is And these data, again, published by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, that is the way crude prices are behaving. They are on average 34% lower than they were last year. So it cannot be that they are the reason fuel prices are going up. What is to be done? We must stimulate production by reducing interest rates. We must reduce taxation on energy, on fuel, on food. Taxation to SMEs is the only way you can stimulate production. We must have a balanced budget. Some have argued not possible. It is possible. In 2003, 2004, 2005, you had a balanced budget and you were able to implement the items of Article 43, like free primary education, zero-based budgeting, and so on. I have to move faster. Finance Act 2023 should repeal it in its entirety. In any case, the broad policy point is reduced taxation. Next cluster of items, review of or audit of the elections. Now, first of all, the audit is not something being suggested. It is the constitutional provision, and you will find it in all those articles of the Constitution from 1, 3, 10, 81, 88, and so on. What kind of audit? Forensic and systems audit is what is required. Why? I mean, Kenyans, as a sovereign, and the Kenya National Human Commission just said the same point, the sovereigns deserve. In any case, audit is a normal process. Every entity of the state, counties, national government, parastatals, everybody gets audited. We must audit this process. And it is by auditing that then we can know what we are fixing. What is the problem that we are fixing with IEBC? So why audit? First of all, there are different numbers from the IEBC server, from the portal. And as you can well imagine, I have mixed feelings about Bomas, but we have different numbers. That's the way the numbers look. When you go by regions, when you aggregate the numbers by region, that's the way it looks. So we must audit. Number 3, numbers must have statistical validity and consistency. Now, these are the results from the Bomas portal. Now, elections happen, honorable members, in a polling station. So you could check candidate A, how many polling stations has she won? Those polling stations aggregate to an electoral ward. So how many wards has the candidate won? That aggregates to a constituency, and that aggregates to a county. How can it be possible for these results to obtain where a candidate wins at the majority of polling stations but does not win overall? We must audit these results. And remember that the IEBC, or the electoral body, for 30 years, 92 to now, with the exception of one general election, something has gone wrong. So we must dig deeper into what are the structural problems that bring this kind of statistical improbability into our life. If you put it in a map, that's the way it looks. Again, how can it be? We must audit the results to know what really went wrong. We want to show you a quick demo about what we mean by auditing the results. And co-chairs, we want to emphasize here that, this is our country, all of us. And an institution that continuously is unable to deliver why we have created it, we must ask ourselves, why is it unable to deliver? This institution, we're just switching, we'll be back there in a moment. This institution, you will notice that the commissioners and the secretariat quarrel all the time. Even when you change the commissioners, you will notice that commissions also fight amongst themselves. You will also notice that the law seems to create unusual decision-making, where a minority view can prevail over majority view because the chair happens to be sitting in that minority. That is not how decisions are made in the ordinary course of human events. We must audit. We want to demonstrate with one form, Barnabas.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members. I just want to take like 4 minutes, not more. I've given you hard copies of some forms to check on, and we want to demonstrate something with them. First, you need to look at them and note that the prints are very small. Those prints are very small, but the signatures are there. That means people signed them, literally. So probably, did they even verify that data before signing on a hard copy format like that? When we look at them on the screen, one of the forms look like that. And then I will give you another form now, which also looks like that. So these are 2 forms. If I click here, that's one of them, and then this is another one. Even by the size, you can see that they are all both the same forms. So looking at them casually by your eyes, they will pass for IEBC forms. One of them is obtained from the Bomas during the election results announcement, and another one is brought later on by the whistleblower who claims to work for IEBC. So we had to take that seriously and compare the 2 forms. So when we compare these 2 forms, we know that what authenticates a form in current technology, one of them is the barcode. If you scan that barcode, it will give you this value, which authenticates that that form, the barcode is correctly placed. When you come to this other form, and then you scan its barcode also, maybe on your mobile device if you decide to, then you will realize that it also gives you this. Apparently, the website that the barcode needs to point you to is pulled down and it no longer exists. So we have these forms, and we were intelligent enough to pick them up while they were still online during the IEBC processes. The next thing that validates a form is the signature. A person cannot decide to sign a form and then later on be given another form to sign without explanation, especially if the forms appear to have some different content. So in other words, the people who signed these forms probably just signed once and took off. So how come the 2 forms seem to have the same signatures again? We have these signatures, and we have that signature. This is Japheth Omara, and this is also Japheth Omara. The third thing that authenticates any form is the stamp. Anybody who stamps a form knows that they own that form, literally. So these 2 forms seem to have, again, the same stamp. But then let's look further. If somebody sends you inside to go check the content, you will take off and say, that's too much, I cannot do it. So we had to use another method of figuring out what the content entails. And so let me take you to what we did to confirm the 2 forms for you. What we did is we took the 2 forms and processed them, and then it had to take the results of all the 4 candidates that were there at that time. Then we realized that in every constituency, the Honorable Professor Wajakoya and the Honorable Mwaure, their data did not change at all. If he got 1 in this form, he got 1 in the other form. But when we checked on the other two candidates, that is Raila Odinga and William Ruto, we noticed that there were some changes that were beginning to show up in these forms. Remember, the IBC whistleblower did not carry this process out. We carried it out as Azimio to check what really happened. Now I want you to look at the last two columns. The last two columns gives us the differences of the votes between the two forms. So if you look at this Moroni Primary School, room 1, Raila got 245 votes and Ruto got 73 votes from the whistleblower's data. Again, Raila got 245 and 73 for Ruto in the Bomas portal data. That gave us a 0 for Raila and a 0 for Ruto. So using that method throughout, we run through this form, and then we start noticing differences. We come to this particular station, and then we realize that here, in the other form for the whistleblower, Raila has 223, and Ruto has 134. And in the Bomas portal, Raila now has 123, and Ruto has 234. That you cannot even verify from that small thing form that is been given to you. Those fonts with the just raw eye, you cannot even read them. But the system read them for us and gave us that. Then we scanned through and realized that there were some jumpy, fishy operations going on in some of these constituencies. So we looked at another one, and we saw here he has, Raila has 277 votes and 102. But then in the Bomas, now he has 77, and William Ruto has 304 votes. Now, when we take that throughout, we notice that in this particular constituency, Raila now has negative 550 votes deducted from him, and Ruto has 550 votes added to him. Now, let's confirm with just one form, and I'll be done. With just one station, and then I will be done. So let's get to this Gazi. Let's get to this Gazi Primary School from these two forms. So I take you to them. The good thing with computers is that you can zoom and you can check, but the form, you may not be able to do that. So we have Gazi Primary School here. In this Gazi, I guess it's this one. This is 223, and this is 134. But when we come to this particular form, and we go to the same station, which is Gazi, Gazi Primary Room 1. Now, Raila has 123 and Ruto has 234. The Professor Ojakoya and Maure, their votes remain unchanged. The other values also remain unchanged. That is the total valid votes. And also you note that the rejected votes were 7. So this is the consistency we have in all this. Just to check, this is the consistency we have in some of the constituencies, and other constituencies there is nothing that happened, and that is where the total votes that you see in the final analyzed result gives us 8 million in the Bomas in the server.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
When we listened to all the other presentations, we were strict on time. So far, this team has done.
I am done, actually.
8 minutes.
I am actually done.
It doesn't matter. People can heckle, can do what. Those are facts, and that's the truth. We were all guided. I'm actually concerned for them because, you know, they have 5 items to present. This is item number 2.
We are sufficiently guided. We thank you, Chair. Now, the next slide coming your way will just point to when we say audit, what is the tapestry, what does it look like to audit the elections results, so that we are quite clear that it involves not just the polling station results, it involves transmission, it involves the audit, involves the responsibilities of all state actors in the process. Now, it's only upon audit that you can actually reconstitute and restructure the IEBC, because then you know what it is that you're fixing, what went wrong, and therefore what are you fixing. Now, in reconstituting it, obviously, the various parties will want both the opposition and government side to contribute to this on a 50-50. When we say restructure, it's not just about changing the persons who are the commissioners. It's about looking at these institutions, as we said, on a structural level, and that involves, of course, the secretariat. We also think we must separate the election management and boundary delimitation for obvious reasons with boundary delimitation. The IBC and election statutes must also align to the Constitution, because the chair should not be a sole shareholder or a sole driver of the institution. The chair ought to be a first among equals. The role of the CEO should be in accordance with Article 250. We must also, of course, have enabling legislation for Articles 86 and 138. IBC should use taxpayers' money, so the elections fund. And there ought to be very stringent penalties for IBC officers, and this should be taken to personal responsibility so that we can have something that works. Of course, monitoring technology, not just by IBC, but also political parties at the polling station level. Political parties should be involved. There was a debate earlier about should politicians be involved. Political parties must be involved in the verification of materials. And also, there should be no statute of limitation on these when people should change the will of the people. So prosecution should be always. Also, there ought to be no changes. There ought to be no changes in electoral rolls inside this, a 6 months window to the general election. Now, we need to make provisions for PWDs in exercise of their rights at Article 38. Again, enabling legislation for youth and vulnerable groups, as well as ensuring the realization of Article 82 for diaspora to exercise their rights. Now, in terms of timeframes, the timeframes need way better management. For example, and we'll come back to this point in a moment, the timeframes for dispute resolution, even within party processes. I want to move to the fourth cluster of issues, governance and the rule of law. Article 10 binds all of us in terms of the national values and principles, all of us being state organs, state officers, and so on. And it is clear that we are doing very badly on this score. Whereas promises had been made that there will be no extrajudicial killings, what the independent medical legal report shows is 128 cases of extrajudicial killings in the last 12 months. The same report shows that the number of torture cases or cases of torture has doubled to 482 cases. The committee made the point earlier that we are here because Kenyans went to the streets demanding certain changes, particularly the better management of the cost of living. During those demonstrations, and they were peaceful demonstrations, there were systematic and targeted political arrests of Azimio leaders and their supporters. Most were detained, many held incommunicado, and in secrecy, and ultimately released without charge. I myself was twice arrested, detained unlawfully in Nyahururu. I've been required to visit that police station every other week. Up to date, no charges have been laid upon me. You all know the case of Maurice Ogeta, who is the security aide to the Azimio leader, who was himself abducted and detained in an unknown location without food. Allow me to just give you a glimpse of what we are talking about if you focus on the following video.
Governor, kindly take note of that your time is truly up. Just take note of that.
Absolutely.
It's truly up.
The point we only want to demonstrate with this video, look at that citizen and the violence being visited upon him. A very sad day indeed for our republic. Again, this next clip shows you what happened to a young man called John, and we will show you in just the video. Suffice it to say, ultimately, John unfortunately passed on while being treated in ICU. I'll pass given time, but again...
let's agree that we can look at that later.
Absolutely.
Please finish.
In our own records, it is 92 persons who are shot dead, not 72. And of course, there have been selective treatment of Kenyan citizens. Recently, there were protests in Uasin Gishu, and no police violence was visited on the citizens there. Again, on police brutality, if you focus on the image on your screen, you have to ask yourself, is that person holding a firearm, is he or she a police officer? And what is their role in a scenario with demonstrators? Why are they there? Again, on governance, we've seen a systematic dropping of corruption cases. One cannot help but believe coercion is in play, that members appointed to government find their corruption cases dropped by the DPP. There's been a complete contempt of ethics. For instance, recently, persons were pardoned under power of mercy with no consideration whatsoever of the victims or indeed following the rule of law. Threats have been made to the judiciary and to judges themselves, in direct violation of the Article 166 that guarantees their independence and protection. We have seen subversion of the course of justice. A case in point is what happened at Mumias, where individuals were told that there are only three options: jail, deportation, or heaven. And Kenyans, of course, subsequently coined Mambo ni Matatu out of that. We have seen undermining of the Senate. This continues, particularly with the question of the Finance Act and the disregard of Senate. Remember, the law is that everything that touches on counties must involve the Senate. On the question of inclusivity, two quick points to make here. Only 13% of the PSs are women, and that clearly cannot be what the law contemplates. In addition, more than 50% of the slots go to two regions, being Central and Rift Valley. I'm rushing because of the urging of the committee.
No, your time is truly up, Governor.
It's not a question of rushing. I think it's time we stop.
Yeah. And therefore,
seriously,
what we recommend on inclusivity,
Governor,
inclusivity, the rule of law, Madam Chair, a public apology.
Do you think it's good that you also listen to what we have to say? That your time is up. You have now done 1 hour, to be honest.
Your guys are
yes, you have done 1 hour, and we had agreed that each team gets a maximum of 30 minutes. You've now done 1 hour, and you're clearly far from finished.
Yeah, no.
So I think we be
Madam Chair,
allowed
we are
to
not,
ask questions
we are not
now.
far from finished.
In all
We are not far
fairness,
from finished, Madam.
Let's urge that you wind up.
Oh, you see,
Yeah,
Chair,
no,
just
it's
before
everywhere.
that, allow me to register a protest.
And you know, as you register, Aaron,
Yeah.
I think the country has taken cognizance of the fact
Yeah.
that this is the main complainant. So clearly, we should be able, as a healing process, I want to suggest, listen to them.
I
No,
hold,
but
Not just
but,
brush things under the table.
Co-chair,
hold,
Co-chair, while I agree
hold-
with you completely, you'll agree they have had an hour which we haven't provided to any other group before you. So clearly, yeah, it's been an hour. It's
Okay.
been an hour.
No, the only thing I wanted to ask, co-chair, I agree with your guidance. Maybe you just need to guide on how many more minutes do we give them, given the fact that when KK was here, I personally hurried Malala out of the seat because I was respectful of the rest of the people that needed to present before us. So maybe if you could guide on a
Thank you.
proposal of 5 minutes,
Thank you.
kindly, please.
5 minutes, yes.
Okay, 5 minutes, we have agreed, please, because you have not even addressed the issue of fidelity to political parties, which I think is key.
I think the two.
If you can do that in a minute. Yeah.
And the gender rule is not yet.
I think the gender rule has been so well canvassed before this committee, but not so much the issue of Jubilee, for
It
example.
is 403
You want
by
to get away
408.
without
You
talking
should be
about
done.
Jubilee. Huh? So, Fadhali, just take.
We are guided. The
Yeah.
gender rule is up. CK, 1 minute.
We'll take into account the gender rule.
Thank you very much. I think it's important that we give Azimio women this chance because we actually put together a memorandum to this
Please
committee, and I'll do that
proceed.
in 1 minute.
Proceed.
So as Azimio women, there are three broad issues that we have canvassed, and we have looked at the 6 bills that have been in Parliament that have failed. We've also looked at the 6 petitions that have been to the Office of the Chief Justice that have also failed, and we also looked at the BBI, and therefore we saw 3 overarching ideas. One, the issue of anchoring the responsibility and implementation of the 2/3 gender rule in the Constitution. And we hold the view that a lot of these things must be anchored in the Constitution, including the formula of exactly how to execute the 2/3 gender rule. There is the issue of the proportional member representation. That has been canvassed greatly. We have looked at models like what is going on in South Africa, where then where people are elected not based on constituencies, but based on both genders and both representation. There is also the proposition of Senate having a 50-50 presentation, having 47 female senators and 47 male senators. That has been canvassed largely by Azimio women as one of the propositions. So to the formula that we think can unstick us is a basic formula, really. I know it looks like it has lots of algebra, but what we are saying is look at the proportion of elected underrepresented gender. And when we say gender, sometimes people think it's about women, but really it's only because women are currently the underrepresented gender. So we're saying that that proportion should add to a variable that we are calling X, and it should be equals to the 34% constitutional requirement on the number of underrepresented gender in both parliaments. So that's a simple formula. So all we're saying is after the election, look at how many women have been elected, look at the proportion that is required to make the constitutional requirement, and top up the rest. I thank you very much.
Well, that's exactly what's happening at the counties, isn't it? So you're saying
we're saying that we bolster the
we borrow from the counties, county assemblies. Perfect.
Article 177.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Dego Njiro. I am here to submit on the position of Jubilee.
You have 2 minutes. We said, yes, you have 2 minutes.
And as such, Honorable Chair, we are here to...
That's a point of order. Did you say you want to submit on the police brutality? For political parties?
No, political parties.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a thing I personally would urge that you put on the table.
Thank you, Chair. We are addressing the question of political infidelity that has been perpetrated by the current regime, and most especially when it comes to the question of Jubilee. We have seen impunious acts and conduct that have been perpetrated, one by the Office of the Registrar. The Office of the Registrar is holding brief for the current regime to the extent that she has mutilated her functions as decreed by the Political Parties Act. It is therefore a recommendation that the office of the registrar ought to be made independent, and that it ought to be insulated from the interferences that has come from the current regime. Number two, on the question of minority and the majority in parliament. The reason why the majority and minority in parliament has been mutilated to the extent that now the person who is sitting in the minority ought to be sitting in the majority, that is Honorable Opio Andai, is because parliament has been captured by the executive. And how did we begin this capture? We began by the when we had the Speaker of the National Assembly being an affiliated and an active partner of the ruling coalition. That means that person lost his objectivity and his impartiality, and that is why by the ruling that was delivered on that particular fateful day to the Kenyans, we ended up losing the majority. Number three, why are we having political parties infidelity? Is because the state is the one that is creating aggression and rebellion in political parties. And we've seen a state-sponsored rebellion within Jubilee political party to the extent that the individuals who were nominated by Jubilee, by Azimio to parliament, they are now dining and wining with the state. And that is an aggression against Article 4. It is a mutilation of Article 4 in the sense that it has completely changed the dynamics and the diagram, the political diagram of political party, of multi-party democracy. And perhaps that could have been caused and triggered by the history that this country has undergone. There are some individuals who perhaps may or may not be involved. They are the ones now at the realm of power. They were not involved in the fight against multi-party democracy. They were not involved in the promulgation of the new constitution, and therefore they do not understand the dictates and the provisions of the new constitution. So we are calling upon Kenyans and recommending that political parties must be respected because it's the backbone of our democracy. The office of the registrar must be constituted by a person who is capable of adjudicating over the disputes, and for this we are proposing that the holder of that office must at least be a person who is capable of being appointed to an office of a judge. I rest my case.
Thank you.
Very well. Can we now ask questions or clarifications? Committee?
Yes, Madam Chair. We wished you could allow. Yes.
It is the committee
Honorable.
that I'm allowing now to ask questions, clarifications, whatever it is.
Indeed.
I go first.
Thank you. Senator Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I want to appreciate the team from Azimio for finding time to as well come because I think like both of you chairs have guided. It's important that we speak to each other and not talk at each other, because that is what was prevailing. I have listened to the presentation of Azimio, and I have a few questions or perhaps comments, chairs. In your presentation, Governor Nderitu, will you perhaps maybe care to just elaborate, because I saw, and your presentation was quite an interesting one, because it has what you would easily refer to as political juxtaposition. All your data all your data and statistics curiously begin from September or thereabouts 2022. Somebody will easily imagine that either the country didn't exist before then, or for some reason it's not an area that we need to focus. But that is not important. What is a place of political instability? Political instability as a factor and a contributor to the deteriorating state of our economy. Because I see you listed quite a number of factors, our import and the rest. What is the significance of that aspect? Second and last comment, Chair, is that the presentation on the audit is something that perhaps struck my curiosity, because, you know, these are issues that have been canvassed. And the simple question one will ask if you didn't know better, is where was all this information during the Supreme Court hearings? Because the funny bit is the stories that you are now canvassing before the committee were equally brought to the attention of the Supreme Court. If you read the ruling of the Supreme Court, I think from paragraph 140 all the way to 144, it goes into detail about these alleged forms and IBC presentations that is now being made before this committee, that were then made before the Supreme Court, and that the finding of the Supreme Court were that those were not legitimate documents. It didn't come from IBC, but it came from your side, and when checked or counter-checked against what IBC presented before the court, they were found actually to be forgeries. And it's elaborate, captured. Supreme Court ruling 142, paragraph 140 to 144. You know, finally, Chair, it's important even as we present this committee to remain factual. I know for a fact, for example, just to pick curiously out of the presentation by Governor Nderitu, I saw he presented, let's say, a count of MCAs. I know for a fact that if you check the count of MCAs in across the Republic, Kenya Kwanza has well over 692 elected MCAs. Azimio has 561, without including even the contested parties, which include UDM and what's the name, the Kiraitu Party, and the rest. The margin is elaborate. So even as we come to present before the committee, let us not forget that there is a history of what led to us being here and remain factual about it. You know, Chair, just in 10 seconds as a last comment, there's a question which I was hoping perhaps Nderitu and his team will respond to. And this was asked by Justice Smokin Wanjala in the case of the Supreme Court. He didn't mention that, okay, we hear your case. As Azimio, you make the argument that you don't trust the technology that was used, that somehow it was hacked. Then he asked, explain to us then how the forms that were physical, marked and signed at the polling station, equally transported eventually before to the National Tallying Center. How could somebody have made an alteration? Because if you recall, and there are quite a number of you that participated in that exercise, randomly, just out of the blues, the Supreme Court picked, I think there were 15 or 30 or something polling stations, and they say, please counter-check what is on the portal if it matches randomly. And curiously, 100%, word for word, point for point, figure for figure, they matched. And that is something which has never been explained up to date. That you could make the case and say, oh, we didn't trust the technology, there were these stories about the forms, what about the physical one? Where were they hacked?
Okay, somebody else?
I wanted to find out, sorry.
Yes, Honorable Andai.
I wanted to find out this mutilation or inversion of Jubilee Party by what you referred as the state, okay? To what extent has it contributed to the erosion of the multi-party democratic culture as was envisaged by the liberators, the second liberation heroes? And finally, on Jubilee again, those who you would want to refer to as masqueraders, who have taken over Jubilee from the legitimate owners, to what extent have they gone in terms of misappropriating the resources of Jubilee? Yes.
Hassan?
One of our former cabinet secretaries is here, and Eugene usually proudly refers to his stint in those previous government, in the previous government. I think Nderitu being, I think, a person in the finance field, in the economic, I think that's your background. I think you've realized over the last 10, 15 years, Kenya has become a net importer of food. We import everything. It's not a situation that we crystallize. There are real natural market forces there. You decide to subsidize consumption. Kenya Kwanza comes in and decides to subsidize production. The whole idea is to ease partly the demand on the dollar which we mop 4.2 billion to 5 billion annually to buy food. Maharagwe, viazi, not viazi, mahindi, mchele, sukari, everything. So what we say, let's provide fertilizer. Let's boost our production so that we ease the demand on the dollar. This dollar you're talking about, we started a G2G program about 4 months ago. At that point, skizeni, at that point, you laughed at Bomas when the current president was presenting. Don't laugh again. You might end up having the last laugh. So we started the G2G 4 or 5 months ago. When we did the G2G, the dollar was doing 139, 140. It slid back to about 130, and then it went up again because there's still a demand on the dollar. There are Kenyans holding dollars. There is $8.5 in the market, $billion in the market. Kenyans are not releasing these dollars for speculative reasons, and for that reason we have an artificial crisis that is occasioned by the shortage of dollar, and that's why the Kenya shilling is sliding as part of the rationale that you can also use as you try to help us to navigate this crisis. So my understanding the dollar, understanding what we are doing in terms of the right things and the wrong things. So how does demonstrations help to bring down the dollar prices? How does demonstrations help to bring any of this sanity into our market? Number two, I was part of a political formation that you have currently joined. I'm now on this side. Some of my friends, Opio and I, are on that side. It's not the first time after an election we've had our own results and our own numbers and our own tally. So I think these kind of results, if they did not find traction in where they needed to be presented, it is a good political narrative for you to have to galvanize your support base. But I think the truth is, as one of the lawyers told you, let it go. It's time we move on.
Well, you may not like what he's saying, but even us seated here didn't like all you said, but we were silent.
They have the right to.
That's the difference. Yeah.
One thing, Derito, if you allow me, because you're representing Azimio la Umoja in Kenya, what would you say to the role of Parliament with regard to strengthening multi-party democracy, and particularly coalition arrangements? I'm surprised you didn't point out the fact that these coalitions, deputy whip in Parliament, is not working for the coalition. I'm surprised you left that out, and I think it's important to point that particular aspect out.
Honorable Eugene.
Thank you very much. I think my colleague, Honorable Omar, is really trying to defend the indefensible on matters cost of living. Of course, he must justify why the dollar has misbehaved. But
maybe, Eugene, you could also have a friend say, is it applicable to the Tanzanian shilling? Because there's a presentation. If there are people holding dollars, yes. Are they holding the Tanzanian shilling?
Tanzania, let me respond. Tanzania imports less than we do in terms of food. In fact, Tanzania even exports to Kenya. So therefore, their demand on the dollar is not as high as our demand on the dollar, and therefore there has been a certain weakening by a shilling or so of the Kenyan shilling on the basis of the demand. Secondly, we have removed the controls that the central bank used to have. The central bank used to fix the dollar rate on a daily basis. So you go to buy in interbanks, you get a better rate. You go out in the market, you get a lower rate, you get a much higher rate. So we decided to allow these controls out so that this dollar swims in its own market.
Okay,
I can tell you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's allow.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think I've been given the opportunity.
I will have a session with Omar and teach him how we did foreign exchange liberalization, yes. Even under Moi.
And I will also teach you what you are doing right now.
No, you haven't answered the question about the Tanzanian shilling.
Kindly, Honorable Eugene.
I think the team appearing before this committee today, if it was a case, this would be the main complainant. on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya. And we cannot say, how do protests help? How do demonstrations help? How do carrying sufurias help? Because we know that protests helped us get a new constitution. It's actually protests when our founding fathers protested and went to the forest against British rule. That's how the British were removed from here. It's protests in Eldoret when children's money was stolen, the Finland Fund, that has brought fellows to be arrested to court, and there are 200 witnesses against them. There are protests that led to the stoppage of mechanization in Kericho. When jobs were being taken away from our people in Kericho, they protested. So you cannot say protests mean nothing, because there are those protests that have led us to sit here in Bomas today. So why we're here is to talk to each other, not at each other. And to look at the challenges facing our nation and come reason together to see how we can find solutions. So, Governor Nderitu Mreithi, you as the presenter on behalf of the complainant, I want you to just restate the facts. We didn't get the figures properly. Senator Aaron has said on the issues of the wards, he has given the figures. I think just for the record, you are saying according to the evidence that you have, the number of votes that according to your evidence that Raila Odinga got, can you be specific? It was at the tail end of your presentation, it didn't come out clearly. The number of constituencies that Azimio won versus Kenya Kwanza, and the counties and the regions. I think we want a clear picture because we can see a blue and yellow map, but you are not clear on the figures that you are talking about. And we are asking for opening of this service so that the truth can set this nation free. So that is why we're here. Apart from the issue of the cost of living, many Kenyans cannot make ends meet, and that is why they went to the streets. You have made proposals, and I'm hoping in your detailed presentation, you have proposed the specific taxes. It's not just enough to say reduction of taxes. The churches, the religious leaders have said, reduce the taxes. FKE has been here. We have professionals who have been here. All of them are talking the same language. But to help this committee, and we know your vast experience in matters finance, please be specific. Like on fuel, we have about 16 taxes and levies. Which ones are you specifically proposing should be scrapped or reviewed downwards? Because that is what really sent the cost of living high when we moved VAT from 8 to 16%. On electricity, we have almost another 10. So putting 20 levies and new taxes at once on the shoulders of a Kenyan. Please be specific in your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Response, 5 last minutes, kindly.
Excuse me, the one question on the...
Yeah, but let it be as brief as possible.
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
Thank you, Governor Nderitu. Part of, the task of this committee is to address issues of accountability, issues of impunity. Now, you have presented some graphic cases where the police are alleged to have used brutal force against Kenyans. Now, from the data that you have, because, even in America, we see some rogue policemen, but you will see action being taken against them. They will be arrested and prosecuted like any criminal. Now, from where you are sitting, do you have any indication as to whether there is any single police officer who has been arrested, taken to court, and charged for any crimes committed against Kenyans by the police. Thank you.
Kindly take note, you have exactly 5 minutes. We have about 10 more teams waiting out there since 2 p.m. Kindly.
No police officer, to our knowledge, has been held to account. As a matter of fact, they have been congratulated by the highest leadership in the regime. I agree with the co-chair that we may not always agree with what each other is saying. I think that's why we are talking. The senator may not agree with our figures, but isn't that why we need an audit? I mean, that's the whole point. Yeah, that we are looking for a neutral arbiter to do so. The question that he asked about the Supreme Court, the whistleblower came way after the Supreme Court matter had been settled. On the matter of Jubilee Party and the illusion of multipartyism, the whole parties are the foundation of democracy. Without functioning political parties, we cannot possibly have democracy. It is incumbent on any regime in power to let parties operate in the manner that is contemplated in the Constitution. So the continued aggression against Jubilee Party, the fact that Jubilee Party and other parties, when they change parliamentary leadership, for example, those changes are not implemented because speakers have taken a partisan view. It is well known, for instance, that Jubilee Party and Azimio coalition have communicated changes to who should be the deputy whip in the assembly, and this has, for more than 6-7 months, not been acted upon by the speaker. So it is clear and that if we continue on this trajectory, we will certainly go back to where we were in the days of a single-party system. On the question of resources of Jubilee Party, and this is a matter being also contested in court, the evidence is that the masqueraders have been allowed by certain actions of officers of state to access Jubilee resources from their accounts. Citizens go to the streets because all other avenues are closed to them. It's not the citizens' wish that they wake up every day and they go to maandamano. So if you ask the question that how does maandamano help manage the economy, you are obviously asking the wrong question. Citizens, Article 1 of the Constitution gives sovereignty to the citizens. The Commission before us said citizens donate powers to those they elect. So if those we elect are not paying fidelity to the Constitution, that is why citizens go to the streets. Regimes that become dictatorial, when citizens complain, they say that that is political instability. But I also want to remind regimes, not just in Kenya, but throughout the continent of Africa, you have seen that citizens do in fact get regimes out of power.
Governor, less than a minute.
On the G2G program, it did not address any of the issues of the cost of living. It actually added costs. Which costs? Interest rates on or interest paid on the LCs. It added, as the honorable member observed, the exchange rate loss. And those are the things that were transmitted to the citizen this September. The reason petrol and or fuel prices in general went up is because of the effect of the G2G. It is not because of international crude prices, and we have demonstrated so to the committee.
Chair, there was a question that was put to me by Honorable, the Majority Leader Opiyo Ndai. the question of the embezzlement of the resources of Jubilee. We must all understand that the motivating factor that has caused rebellion in Jubilee was not for the proper management of the party, but for the purposes of grabbing the resources that belongs to Jubilee. As we speak, that is happening. The spillage of the political party funds and the properties of Jubilee is happening under the watch and under the auspices and guidance and supervision of the registrar of political party. Letters have been written because the High Court gave conservatory orders dictating that the current office is the one that is going to exist until the case is heard and determined. Even with that order, impunity has dictated to those offices that orders should not be respected, that the rebellious group in Jubilee should manage the resources. I am informed as we speak about 90 million Kenyan shilling cannot be traced, cannot be accounted, no transparency. It was never sanctioned by the party. That is the kind of the democracy we have established. Finally, on the question of the impartiality of the Speaker of the National Assembly, that must be addressed. There is no way a ruling coalition can have a partner who becomes the head of the second or third organ of government being an affiliate of a leading coalition. You can never have impartiality, and that is why currently Honorable Sabina Chege, despite the fact that she has been de-whipped by the political party, still holds out, masquerades, and holds out as the chief whip for the party.
Thank you so much, Governor.
May I just answer the question by Honorable Amalwa? Yeah.
30 seconds, Governor. Kindly, you'll agree with. You've now done 1.5 hours.
The specific numbers are the following. I'll just read the numbers. 24,499 polling stations for the Azimio candidate, 21,703 polling stations. You asked what is it in terms of electoral wards. 803 electoral wards, 648 for the KK candidate. In terms of constituencies, and remember here when we count constituencies, we count diaspora. So it should add up to 291. 160 versus 131.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Governor.
I think
we'll end it there. Thank you very much, Azimio, for coming and making a good presentation.
The whistleblower speaker.
I just really wish to Governor Derito, I just really wish you were the finance minister of the past regime, because the debt we are in will not
the current regime.
There would not be. We will not be struggling paying debts had things been done well. That's a fact. Today ni siku ya kusema ukweli. I wish you were the one.
You also did not come here to co-opt him.
But I think they'll do a good job as an opposition.
With that, we thank the committee for the time accorded us. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Asante sana. Please use the door to the right to exit so that the others can come in. Thank you.
The cross-parliamentary group.
You know there are other people who came way earlier.
Yeah.
Way earlier.
Well, CPG go up.
Where is what team is coming in kindly? Secretariat? CPG. You know we have how many more agreements?
No.
Kindly, if you are exiting, hi, Patty Onyango, Asante, good to see you. If you're exiting, kindly do so quickly and silently, kindly. Now, the Coast Parliamentary Group, karibu sana, but I want us to agree on certain things. Number one, we have another 6 groups waiting out there. Today is our last day. It is now it's actually 4:37 p.m. So you'll agree with me that the most we can do with you, both present